Conventional military wisdom suggests that a smaller regional power has no hope against the undisputed hegemony of the United States Navy. However, the Islamic Republic of Iran does not intend to fight a fair fight or engage in a symmetric naval engagement. Their strategy is built upon the cold logic of cost imposition and the brutal reality of geographic constraints in the Persian Gulf. Iran does not need to destroy the United States Navy to achieve its primary strategic objectives in the Middle East. They only need to make the waters of the Gulf impossible to navigate and too expensive for a carrier strike group. This is the doctrine of asymmetric warfare, where the weak exploit the inherent vulnerabilities of the strong through relentless saturation. Picture a civilian shipping container on a seemingly harmless vessel drifting slowly toward a multi-billion-dollar American aircraft carrier. With a single command, the container doors swing open to reveal a pre-positioned missile ready for a short-range, surprise launch. This concept of containerized lethality allows Iran to hide its primary offensive punch within the chaotic flow of global commerce. The strike is immediately supported by a coordinated swarm of low-flying loitering munitions and high-speed attack boats closing the distance. Even the most advanced defense systems face a mathematical breaking point when forced to track hundreds of targets at once. This brings us to the first pillar of the Iranian denial strategy, known simply as the tactical swarm. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy operates a fleet of hundreds of fast attack craft equipped with heavy machine guns. These boats are small, difficult to detect on radar, and capable of maneuvers that larger destroyers simply cannot replicate in tight spaces. Instead of a single ship-to-ship duel, Iran deploys dozens of these craft simultaneously from every possible point of the compass. The objective is to overwhelm the phalanx close-in weapon system and the C-RAM launchers through pure volume and physical saturation. Every missile fired by a U.S. destroyer to kill a cheap fiberglass boat is a win for the Iranian attrition model. By presenting more threats than the ship's sensors can track, the Iranians aim to slip one or two strikes through. Tactic 2 shifts the focus from the surface to the depths of the world's most critical maritime choke point. The Strait of Hormuz is the jugular vein of the global energy market and the primary target for Iranian naval mines. Iran maintains a massive inventory of thousands of naval mines, ranging from simple contact types to sophisticated smart acoustic mines. These smart mines are programmed to listen for the specific acoustic signatures of U.S. carriers or heavy logistics ships. During a conflict, civilian vessels or small boats would drop these silent killers directly into the primary shipping lanes. This is not just a military action, but a form of economic warfare designed to paralyze the global oil supply. A single confirmed mine strike would skyrocket global oil prices and force the U.S. Navy into a slow, dangerous clearing operation. While the U.S. mine sweeps, there remain static targets for the third tactic in the Iranian playbook, the kill zone. The Iranian coastline is a rugged, mountainous fortress that provides perfect natural cover for mobile coastal missile batteries. They utilize shoot and scoot tactics where truck-mounted launchers fire their payloads and vanish into tunnels before a counterstrike occurs. This effectively turns the entire Persian Gulf into a lethal kill zone where no ship is truly safe from land-based fire. The geography ensures that U.S. ships are always within range of Iranian ballistic and cruise missiles launched from hidden positions. Tactic 4 introduces the silent ambush threat posed by Iran's specialized fleet of diesel-electric midget submarines. The Persian Gulf is remarkably shallow with an average depth that makes it difficult for massive nuclear-powered submarines to maneuver. This environment is the natural habitat for the Ghadir-class submarines, which are nearly impossible to detect when sitting on the seafloor. These subs wait in silence for a high-value target to pass directly overhead before launching heavyweight wake-homing torpedoes. A successful torpedo strike on a carrier's propulsion system could leave it dead in the water and vulnerable to further attack. This surprise ambush tactic is designed to cripple the U.S. Navy's ability to project power from the sea. Tactic 5 looks to the skies, where Iran has established itself as a regional superpower in the realm of drone warfare. They would deploy massive waves of loitering munitions, colloquially known as suicide drones, to blind the sensors of the fleet. Even if these drones do not sink a ship, they can destroy radar dishes and flight deck equipment with precision. A blinded fleet cannot defend itself against the heavier ballistic missiles that would inevitably follow the initial drone waves. Finally, Tactic 6 focuses on the logistical reality that the U.S. Navy cannot operate without its network of regional bases. Iran possesses the largest and most diverse ballistic missile arsenal in the Middle East, capable of reaching every U.S. installation. Their strategy involves massive barrages targeting static headquarters like Naval Support Activity Bahrain and Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. By striking fuel depots, runways, and command centers, Iran aims to sever the logistical lifeline of the American military presence. If the U.S. ships have no safe harbor to refuel or rearm, they cannot maintain a sustained presence in the region. This is a war of exhaustion designed to force a political decision to withdraw from the Gulf entirely. Iran's goal is not a traditional victory on the high seas, but the total disruption of American strategic interests. The real question is whether the United States is willing to pay the staggering cost of staying in the fight. To analyze the tactical execution of this doctrine, one must look at the specific systems designed to exploit American defensive architecture. The Iranian strategy hinges on the concept of probability of kill through mass, rather than the perfection of a single weapon. At the heart of the coastal defense are the Noor and Qatar anti-ship cruise missiles, evolved from battle-tested regional designs. These missiles skim the surface of the water at high speeds to stay beneath the radar horizon of a target destroyer. By the time the ship's radar detects the incoming threat, the window for a successful interception has shrunk to mere seconds. This threat is magnified by the sheer number of launchers hidden along the 2,200 kilometers of the Iranian southern coastline. U.S. planners must account for every cave and every tunnel, a task that strains even the most advanced satellite reconnaissance networks. While the missiles provide the long-range punch, the IRGC Navy's fast boats provide the chaotic, close-in pressure of the swarm. These vessels, such as the Zulfiqar and Siraj 1, are designed for high-speed hit-and-run attacks in the littoral environment. Each boat represents a low-cost asset that can be replaced easily, whereas a single Aegis interceptor costs millions of dollars. This creates a massive economic imbalance where the defender spends exponentially more to protect a target than the attacker spends. If a swarm of 50 boats approaches a carrier, the defensive priority becomes a nightmare of target prioritization and ammo management. Even the formidable Phalanx Gatling guns have a limited magazine capacity and must eventually pause for a dangerous reload. Image showing a 360-degree swarm formation of small boats surrounding a central carrier strike group. Under the waves, the Goddard-class midget submarines operate with a level of stealth that larger nuclear vessels cannot achieve. Their diesel-electric engines can be shut down entirely, allowing the sub to rest on the seafloor as a smart mine. In this state, they emit zero noise and are virtually indistinguishable from the jagged rocks and debris of the Gulf floor. They are armed with 533mm heavyweight torpedoes, capable of blowing a hole large enough to sink or disable an Arleigh-Burke-class destroyer. The shallow water of the Gulf creates complex acoustic reflections, which masks the sub's presence from traditional hull-mounted sonar. This geographic advantage turns the shallow Persian Gulf into a graveyard for those who rely solely on deep-water naval technology. Beyond the immediate naval engagement, Iran's drone program, specifically the Shahed and Mohajer series, serves as a force multiplier. These drones are not intended to engage in dogfights but to act as precision-guided, low-cost aerial torpedoes from the sky. Waves of these drones can be launched from the backs of civilian trucks, making their launch sites nearly impossible to preempt. Their primary target is the eyes of the fleet, the SPY-1 radar arrays that provide the ship's situational awareness. If the radar is damaged by a small explosive charge, the ship is effectively blinded and unable to guide its defensive missiles. Once the sensors are degraded, the fleet becomes a sitting duck for the heavier, more lethal ballistic missiles held in reserve. The Iranian ballistic missile arsenal includes the Khalij Fars, a supersonic anti-ship missile specifically designed to hit moving naval targets. Unlike cruise missiles, ballistic missiles descend from the upper atmosphere at speeds exceeding Mach 3, providing almost no reaction time. This vertical threat, combined with the horizontal threat of cruise missiles, creates a cross-axis saturation that few defenses can handle. Moving inland, the strategy shifts toward neutralizing the logistical infrastructure that sustains the American military machine in the Middle East. U.S. bases like Al-Udeid in Qatar and Ali al-Salem in Kuwait are within the inner ring of Iranian missile range. These bases host the tankers, the command centers, and the munitions depots required for a sustained American air campaign. A coordinated strike on these facilities would not just destroy aircraft, but would paralyze the entire command and control structure. Runways would be cratered, fuel bladders ignited, and hardened shelters tested by the sheer kinetic energy of heavy warheads. Without regional air superiority, the U.S. carrier strike group loses its primary offensive edge and its most effective shield. The objective of these base strikes is to create a no-go zone for American logistics, starving the fleet of supplies. In this scenario, the U.S. Navy is forced to operate from much greater distances, drastically reducing its sortie rates and effectiveness. This logic of denial is reinforced by the presence of Iranian-aligned proxy forces throughout the region, from Iraq to Yemen. These groups can launch their own attacks on U.S. assets, forcing the American military to fight on multiple, dispersed fronts. The Houthi rebels in Yemen have already demonstrated the ability to disrupt global shipping using Iranian-supplied anti-ship technology. This creates a strategic pincer where the U.S. must defend both the Strait of Hormuz and the Bab el-Mandeb. The mental and physical exhaustion of maintaining a high alert status across such a wide area is a weapon in itself. In asymmetric warfare, the goal is to make the enemy's presence a liability that outweighs any potential strategic gain. By targeting the infrastructure of power, Iran attempts to decouple the U.S. from its regional allies in the Gulf. If the U.S. cannot guarantee the safety of its bases or its ships, its influence in the region rapidly evaporates. This is the cold mathematics of the Middle Eastern chessboard, a war of attrition where the cheaper asset wins. The power of a carrier is irrelevant if it is too afraid to enter the waters where its power is needed. To visualize the collapse of a carrier's defense, we must understand the leaking effect inherent in every saturation attack. No defense system is 100% effective. Every interceptor has a finite probability of missing its high-speed, low-altitude target. When Iran launches a coordinated barrage, they are gambling on the statistical certainty that eventually a missile or drone will leak through. The first wave is always sacrificial, composed of the cheapest drones and oldest missiles to force the U.S. to expend its magazines. Once the VLS cells of a destroyer are empty, that ship is transformed from a formidable shield into a defenseless steel hull. This leads us to the specific mechanics of the kill zone established along the jagged cliffs of the Iranian coastline. Image: a cross-section of the Iranian coast showing hidden missile silos buried deep within reinforced mountain granite. These underground missile cities protect the arsenal from preemptive American airstrikes, ensuring a second strike capability is always available. The Fatah hypersonic missile represents the newest evolution in this threat, designed to maneuver at speeds that defy current interception logic. If a hypersonic glide vehicle can bypass the Aegis defense, the survival of a carrier becomes a matter of luck rather than technology. At the same time, the Ghadar midget submarines move into position, utilizing the thermal layer of the shallow Gulf to hide. These subs don't just fire torpedoes. They are capable of laying specialized smart mines that activate only when a specific vessel passes. Imagine a naval mine that can distinguish between a neutral oil tanker and a U.S. Navy replenishment ship by engine vibration. By targeting the logistics ships, Iran can effectively starve a carrier strike group of fuel and aviation gas without hitting the carrier. Without a constant flow of tankers, a carrier is nothing more than a floating airfield with no planes capable of taking off. This is the systems-level destruction that Iran prioritizes, attacking the connections between the ships rather than the ships themselves. We must also address the psychological dimension of this asymmetric doctrine, which targets the political will of the American leadership. The sight of a single U.S. destroyer burning in the Persian Gulf would create a domestic political firestorm in the United States. Image: dramatic rendering of a U.S. destroyer listing in the water with smoke rising surrounded by dozens of Iranian fast craft. For Iran, losing 500 small boats is a manageable tactical cost. For the U.S., losing one destroyer is a strategic catastrophe. This disparity in acceptable loss is the fundamental pillar that supports the entire Iranian military strategy in the region. Tactic 6 extends this pressure to the regional air bases, where the airburst capability of Iranian missiles is most devastating. By detonating warheads several hundred feet above a base, Iran can shower the entire facility with lethal high-velocity fragmentation. This doesn't just destroy buildings. It shreds the sensitive skins of parked F-35 seconds and pierces unarmored fuel storage tanks. One well-placed missile can render an entire squadron of stealth fighters combat ineffective before they even have a chance to scramble. At Al Udeid Air Base, the sheer density of personnel and equipment makes it a target-rich environment for Iranian short-range ballistic missiles. Image: satellite view of Al Udeid Air Base with red overlays showing the blast radius of a coordinated Fateh 110 strike. These missiles, like the Zulfiqar, utilize GPS and electro-optical guidance to achieve a circular error probable of less than 10 meters. This precision allows Iran to target specific hangars or even the windows of the Combined Air Operations Center, CAOC. If the command and control node is severed, the regional air defense network collapses into a series of isolated, uncoordinated units. This fragmentation of command is exactly what the Iranian swarm tactics are designed to exploit on the water. Meanwhile, in the Red Sea, Iranian-backed proxies utilize the Noor anti-ship missile to threaten the southern approaches to the Suez Canal. This creates a global maritime crisis, as shipping companies refuse to enter any waters within range of Iranian-made technology. The economic impact of rerouting global trade around Africa would cost the world economy billions of dollars every single day. This economic blockade is a weapon that Iran can trigger without ever firing a shot at a U.S. warship. It is a strategy of hostage-taking on a global scale, where the world's economy is held captive by the threat of asymmetric war. The U.S. Navy then faces a catch-22. Stay out and allow the blockade, or enter and face the saturation of the kill zone. Modern sensors and precision weapons have made the surface of the ocean a very dangerous place to hide for large ships. A carrier is a massive radar target, a steel mountain that can be seen from space and tracked by long-range drones. In contrast, the Iranian forces are dispersed, hidden, and mobile. They are the ghosts in the machinery of the Gulf. Even the use of Soviet-era technology, like the converted SA-2 missiles, serves a specific purpose in this overarching strategy. These missiles travel at Mach 3.5, providing a high-speed kinetic threat that forces the defender to react instantly. Image. Comparison of a Mach 3.5 missile's travel time versus the reaction time of a standard naval CIWS system. It is not about the age of the missile, but the physics of its flight path and the stress it places on the defender. By mixing old technology with new, Iran ensures that the U.S. Navy must defend against a chaotic variety of flight profiles. This prevents the U.S. from optimizing its defenses for a single type of threat, forcing a jack-of-all-trades defensive posture. The ultimate goal is to reach a tipping point where the defensive systems simply cease to function under the weight of the attack. Once that point is reached, the technical superiority of the United States Navy becomes a moot point in the face of massed fire. We are witnessing a shift in the nature of naval power, where cheap and many challenges expensive and few. The geography of the Middle East has provided Iran with the perfect laboratory to perfect this doctrine of denial. The final layer of this asymmetric architecture is the persistent threat of insider and proxy sabotage within the host nations themselves. Countries like Bahrain, hosting the U.S. Fifth Fleet, possess complex internal demographics that Iran has spent decades attempting to influence. By stirring civil instability or utilizing sleeper cells, Iran can threaten the security of U.S. personnel even when they are off-duty. This forces the U.S. military to divert significant resources toward force protection and internal security, rather than outward-facing combat. It creates a claustrophobic environment for U.S. sailors and airmen, where the line between a civilian port and a battlefield is non-existent. This brings us back to the central thesis of the power narrative, the leverage of the small against the constraints of the large. A U.S. carrier strike group is a system designed for open ocean dominance, optimized for the vast expanses of the Pacific or Atlantic. When shoved into the bathtub-like confines of the Persian Gulf, its greatest strengths, range, and speed are effectively neutralized by the shoreline. Iran has correctly identified that the carrier is not just a weapon, but a symbol of American prestige and political capital. To sink a carrier is to humiliate a superpower. To merely damage one is to prove that the superpower is not invincible. The technical reality of 2026 is that precision-guided munitions have outpaced the development of mobile, high-volume defensive interception. This is why the Iranian drone swarms are so critical. They are the infantry of the sky, overwhelming the knights of the ocean. Image. A tactical diagram showing saturation depth where incoming threats exceed the maximum simultaneous tracking capacity of a radar system. When the tracking system hits its limit, the computer begins to drop targets, allowing even slow-moving drones to penetrate the inner perimeter. Furthermore, the use of electronic warfare, EW, by Iran should not be underestimated in this coordinated multi-domain strike. By jamming the data links between the carrier and its escorting destroyers, Iran can create blind spots in the fleet's collective defense. A destroyer that cannot share its radar data with the carrier is a destroyer that can be picked off one-on-one by a submarine. This disintegration of the network is the ultimate goal of the 6 tactics we have analyzed throughout this power narrative. We must also consider the day-after scenario, the immediate aftermath of a naval engagement in the Strait of Hormuz. Even if the U.S. Navy wins the battle and clears the Iranian fleet, the cost of that victory would be a broken global energy market. The insurance rates for commercial tankers would remain at war zone levels for years, causing a permanent shift in global trade routes. In this sense, Iran achieves a strategic victory even if they suffer a total tactical defeat on the actual battlefield. They have fundamentally altered the risk-reward calculation for any Western power contemplating military intervention in the Middle East. This is the essence of deterrence in the 21st century, making the status quo safer than the alternative of a victorious war. The U.S. military has responded to this by developing distributed lethality, trying to spread its power across many smaller, unmanned vessels. Image. Artist rendering of a U.S. Navy ghost fleet of unmanned surface vessels operating in a distributed network. This is a direct admission that the era of the big, expensive, centralized target may be coming to an end in literal waters. As the U.S. shifts its strategy, Iran continues to iterate on its swarm logic, incorporating artificial intelligence into its drone and boat formations. The next generation of Iranian swarms will not be remote-controlled, but autonomous, capable of making split-second tactical decisions without a human link. This removes the vulnerability of electronic jamming and creates a fire-and-forget threat on a massive collective scale. The conflict in the Gulf is no longer a question of who has the better technology, but who has the better mathematical model of attrition. For Iran, the math is simple. lose $10,000, $20,000. Drones to kill one $13 billion aircraft carrier and its 5,000 crew. That is a trade-off that the Iranian leadership is willing to make every single time, and it is a trade the US cannot afford. This narrative isn't about the morality of war or the politics of the regime. It is about the physics of the kill chain. It is about the fact that 1,000 small stings can kill a giant if the giant is trapped in a narrow room. The Persian Gulf is that room, and the Iranian military has spent 40 years lining the walls with sharpened spikes. To ignore this reality is to invite a catastrophic failure of strategic imagination that could reshape the global order overnight. As we look toward the future of naval warfare, the lessons of the Gulf will be applied to every other choke point on the planet. From the South China Sea to the Black Sea, the doctrine of disruption over victory is becoming the new standard for regional powers. The age of undisputed carrier diplomacy is being challenged by the age of the low-cost, high-volume kinetic swarm. Iran's goal was never to match the U.S. Navy ship for ship, but to render those ships irrelevant through the threat of total denial. In the cold logic of geopolitical power, if you cannot use your strength, you do not effectively possess that strength at all. By making the Gulf too dangerous for the U.S. to operate in, Iran effectively wins the regional struggle for influence. The U.S. is left with a difficult choice: escalate to a full-scale land war to clear the coast, or accept the new reality. Neither option is particularly appealing to a nation weary of forever wars and focused on the growing competition in the Pacific. This script has outlined the 6 tactical pillars that make this denial possible: swarms, mines, coastal missiles, subs, drones, and logistic strikes. Each pillar is designed to exploit a specific physical or system-level weakness in the American way of war. So the real question is not whether the U.S. Navy is the most powerful force in history, but whether power alone is enough. In a world of cheap drones and narrow straits, the giant may find that its greatest weapons are its greatest liabilities.